Good morning. Our speaker this morning is a former nationally ranked track and field performer, a master of the martial arts, a scholar, a researcher. His biography was included along with other speakers for the general sessions that you can access. I'm going to focus my introduction this morning on what I know firsthand about Gil Whiting from working with him for the last few years. I first met Gil Whiting in the fall of 2017 when, as Dean of the College of Education at the University of Lynchburg, I was tasked with finding a speaker for the Roselle Schule Lecture on Education and Human Diversity. I wanted a speaker who would challenge school, city, and university leaders in Lynchburg to reimagine how we could educate young men of color. While philosophy, theory, constructs, research are important in this effort, I really wanted a speaker who had developed constructs and had conducted research around those, around the actual implementation. I also contacted many people around the country, and Gil Whiting's name continued to come up. He did not disappoint. His lecture left many of us as educators hopeful for the future. I also wanted someone who would spend some additional quality time with school, government, and community leaders to talk about what could be done within the city as a whole to transform education. Unfortunately, as we were getting ready to begin new efforts, the COVID pandemic occurred and most activities were placed on hold. As the crisis came to an end, we resumed our discussions with Dr. Whiting, and through a series of meetings, we agreed to pilot the Scholar Identity Institute at the University of Lynchburg with Lynchburg City students. This one-week experience, followed by mentors at each of the two high schools, working with those students during the academic year, was incredibly positive. And we continued the experience in 2023, and most recently, earlier this month, with EC Glass and Heritage students. Dr. Whiting has led the training of those students. He focused on the constructs, and he challenged students to explore ways that those constructs could be internalized. I've been connected to education as a teacher, a coach, a middle school principal, a high school principal, an assistant superintendent, a professor, a dean, and an associate provost for almost 54 years. I have never seen a better teacher, a better role model, or a better practitioner than Gil Whiting. His ability to connect with students, to set expectations consistent with what Todd Whitaker talked about yesterday, and to challenge students was extraordinary. I saw him expose and engage students with content that was at the college or graduate school level, and those students responded. I can honestly say it was the best week of teaching I have ever observed. The superintendent of Lynchburg City Schools invited a school representative and his mother to talk about the Institute to the school board. The young man talked about how the experience changed the trajectory of his life and how he was internalizing the scholar identity construct. His mother talked about the change she saw in her son during the time right after the Scholar Identity Institute and his new focus on new goals and a new commitment to learning. It is my privilege to introduce our fourth general session speaker, Vanderbilt University professor, Dr. Gil Whiting.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. No, just kidding. After all that, what else could I say, right? Gil Whiting's not here today, so I'm going to stand in for him. He sounds like a great guy, accomplished guy, and he would be privileged to be here with you all today. Of course, those are just jokes. Every time I hear Dr. Jones speak about some of the things I've done in his city, with his university, and the schools there, I'm humbled because you just don't like to hear people talk about you that way. But talk about Roger Jones, right? Let's put him on the spot. This is a man who retired 17 times. He's coached everybody who's played anything in the city of Lynchburg, whether it's pickleball or baseball, track and field, or something, he's been involved in it. And he's been a mentor and a role model in terms of leadership for myself. So I reciprocate the feelings and the thoughts, and the award he received yesterday is well deserved and earned. I often say in one of my programs I run called I See Me, picture is worth 1,000 words. We know the adage. Well, I think if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video has to be worth millions. So let's take a look. Can we switch to the...
Well, what y'all think about that? I could just walk away, say thank you after that, because that version of the scholar identity model, it has changed over the last 25 years, and it has gotten to a point now where it has been done in Brazil, Belize, India, and South Africa. I've had all white males in a group. I had mixed students in a group. I want to get these questions out of your head because this video was shot between 2006 and 2011, about 6-7 years. Hence my hair color changing, length, all that good stuff there. So I'm the wined version of that person I used to be. But I'm doing a lot more in terms of involvement with the students. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a few folks that were responsible for me being here today, because I think that we're all in a place where we're supposed to be. Ramon Goins was a doctoral student at Lynchburg College at the time, now University of Lynchburg, now associate professor in Baltimore. And he used my work during his dissertation, and he was one of the people contacting me about inviting to be the Roselle Schuell lecturer for the University of Lynchburg back so long ago. And at that meeting, I did meet Dr. Roger Jones, Dr. Carter Owens, and so many other staff. More recently, the president, Dr. Marcia Shetler, and also the superintendent, Dr. Crystal Edwards. And they embraced the work. We've done it now for 3 years at the University of Lynchburg, and they've opened up their doors to a lot of the students who are there. So one thing is that we didn't have, like I said, we didn't have enough mic length for me to stand here, so I've got to go over here and run some things from over here. So I'll keep talking to you this way. Questions, not questions. You should never do that when you have a large audience, so I won't do that now. I had a question for you, though. What does it take, how much does it take to incarcerate a child in Virginia for 1 year? What does it take? Approximately, what does it cost? Good guess. Not even close, but we'll keep that thought in mind for a second. So today I'm going to tell you a few stories, give you some data, show you some images from one of Virginia's most outstanding communities, in my opinion, humble that it may be. Hopefully you're sitting somewhere, when you're sitting later somewhere in a quiet place and you can reflect on some of the things I've said, think about our time together. You'll reach out. I have a picture up behind me, and it has a QR code down in the corner with my contact information. A lot of times we cannot do much in 1 hour to move the needle that much. But in terms of a resource, I hope you all to be resources for me, and I hope that I can be a resource for you. As I said earlier, I am a teacher, and I proudly say so because teachers have saved my life. Literally, teachers saved my life. What Dr. Jones didn't say to you all was that I was from a family of 10 children. I've had 2 brothers who were shot. One was killed by the police Another one died a couple of years ago of a fentanyl overdose. And at the tender age of 12 years old, or 10 years old, not only was I jumped into a gang, but by 12 years old, I was also in juvenile detention. So to ask how much it costs to keep a child incarcerated, I'll show you some facts and statistics later. But I want you to think about these 6 words. I'll ask you the 6 words at the end of this and see who can remember them. This is your test for today. So we all can say this together. Thoughts, words, actions. You got those 3 so far? Okay. Habits, character, destiny. Got it. So how many of you celebrated Juneteenth? 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, good. We got work to do here. I'm equity-minded. I would like to see everyone have an opportunity and reach their full potential. I said I would like to see everyone have an opportunity and see their full potential. We're going to talk about some NAEP information, and there's also some work we've done a few years ago on missingness. I work from special education to gifted education, and we'll talk about some of those things. When we think about incarceration of young men, I'll talk that in a second, and I'll tell you why I do some of the work I do. I didn't come here, last time I came through here, first time I came through here was in 1984. I was going down to this little city down in Fayetteville, was a little city called Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I learned to jump out of perfectly good airplanes. And during that time, I took a commission as an officer in the United States Army Special Forces is what I ended up doing. So I haven't changed much in 40 years. Considering I was 20 in that picture and I'm 62 now, I haven't changed much, I don't think, anyway. But anyway, I say that because the service and the time I've done, I want to let you know where I come from in terms of the background from which a lot of our kids come from. And a lot of you yourselves as teachers, and as former teachers, but administrators, principals, vice principals, and things like that, also have teachers and students who will go through a lot of the same things I've gone through. And some of yourselves probably had some of the very similar issues that you dealt with. But current research and several significant, often negative outcomes for students that don't graduate from high school is what I'm very much concerned about. So when I think about the Scholar Identity Institute as well as the model, I think about what is it that makes a student have an identity that can be considered athletic. I see outside here the Herff Jones, and I see the football jackets, and I see the banners and things like that are outside here, which I think are great. By the way, I want to call your attention to this one right here. Someone made me this banner this morning. I walked through, I was just talking to her at 7 in the morning. She didn't have anything else to do, so she made me this banner. So I didn't bring that with me. That was made out there, so I'm not trying to promote those. But also, let me tell you else what she gave me. Give me a second here. I got my book bag. Yes, this is a presentation. Because I didn't realize that I knew Roger was going to get an award. So what she did was she made me an award too. I gotta stand up here so everybody can see it. So I have an award, by the way, as well. I am the greatest keynote presenter. And I have an official document that says that. So thank you. Thank you. And it has the VASSP on it. It's official. So, yeah, that's great stuff right there. When I went to school, we barely had a Xerox machine. But anyway, okay. So I'm going to answer that question we had a little second ago. This is what it cost Virginia taxpayers to incarcerate or imprison a child for 1 year. $215,000 when it only costs $12,000 roughly to educate one. Stop right there, just take that in. When I came out of the military in Providence, Rhode Island, I went to Providence where I grew up. I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. I was going to do a master's program because they told me to make the rank of captain, you need to have your master's. So I started a master's in African American Studies as well as urban planning because I always wanted to know who the hell designed these roads? How come they cut right through the black neighborhoods? Why is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard always leads right into the hood? Why is the south side always that side? Unless you're in D.C. where it's northwest. Actually, it's southeast, actually. Right? South again. But these are some of the things I was interested in, and I was thinking about going back in, but then I went to the reserve. So that's what I decided to stay and do. But what I also did was I started talking to a lot of the community planners, the city planners. And I was like, hey, look, I work a lot with young men in the military. I want to work with some of the kids. I'll tell you what, it costs $1.5 million, this is 1992 money, to maintain an electric fence that goes around a detention center for kids. You pay me what it costs to keep 1 to 2 kids incarcerated, and I'll keep 10 of them out. What was their response? That $1.5 million fence. You got the Community Corporations of America, the 4th largest prison developer in the country, behind the federal government, I think it's Texas, and then maybe California. And their motto is quality corrections for less. So instead of selling me a $30,000 bed or $1,500 spoon, they're only going to charge me $1,000. Taxpayer money. But the thing was, it's a business, and they want to keep that there. So a lot of our students, our young students, black and white males, find themselves not graduating from high school and find themselves with all the related incidents that happens from not obtaining a high school diploma. Health, wealth, not being able to have relationships, also passing on that to their children to where they don't graduate either. So it's our responsibility. Here's another piece that goes along with Virginia's issues around that. It also has this. When we look at the population of African Americans in the state, it does not make sense that we would have something of this magnitude, where you have something that's almost 5 times as likely to be incarcerated in this state alone. But you're not by yourself. I don't want to leave you out there. It's not a jump on a Virginia deal, because here's California. $305,000 a year and $12,000 roughly to educate. And in California, they're 9, almost 10 times more likely, with a smaller African American population, by the way. By the way, all these little pictures on the side are my guys from University of Lynchburg and EC Glass, as well as Heritage High School in the great city of Lynchburg, Virginia. I almost put you on Tennessee, Dr. Roger Jones. And I said, well, what's it look like in a state where it's the lowest percentage of African American in the state? Where's that? Is that North Dakota? Close. Maine, Iowa, Montana? I don't know, but it's Idaho. Idaho. And even in Idaho, it costs $100,000 to incarcerate a youth for a year. Only $7,000 to educate. But it has the smallest population. So let's see what it looks like in terms of what happens. 7.2 times more likely for African American to be incarcerated than a white child in that state. So there's a pandemic. And I think education, what we do as administrators, as principals, middle schools, high schools, this is the calling that I want to charge you with, saying that when we fail to do our jobs, we fail children. That's a heavy burden. I work with principals up in, all the way up in northern Minnesota. We got one principal up there who's in Anoka, Hennepin, whatever the school district up there, 27 elementary schools. They had a cutoff score for gifted and talented children, and they had a district-wide score. So I'm with the National Association for Gifted Children as well, and we look at individual schools, look at kids compared to the kids that they're living with and working with, the socioeconomics of those children. This is how we should be looking at how we decide how gifted they are in terms of their environment. But when you look at them at a national ranking or a state ranking or even a district level ranking, we'll always miss the talent that is there. And my hands were idle. I was a talented young man, talented child. And that talent unrequited led me to doing a whole bunch of stuff that got me incarcerated by the time I was 13 years old. So we have to think about that. But as we talk about a lot of these young men and what they're in jail for, a lot of it tends to be what some states are legalizing right now. And we just heard 170,000 folks not too far from here were just released for these same charges. As I drove into the city of Lynchburg, I noticed that we don't have an overabundance of people in jail for fentanyl. Even our drugs are raced. And I know we're not supposed to say the R word here. It used to be the N word, now it's the R word. We are not supposed to say these things these days in a political climate. Two older gentlemen are going to be battling it out tonight. Anyway, back to the talk. I came into Lynchburg and I saw this sign here. And I stopped my car. I actually went around the block and came back and parked on the side of the road so I could get a good picture of it. And I looked good at the pictures up there. I see several pictures up there. And what I don't see in those pictures are any African-American folk. My brother, I told you at the beginning of this, died of fentanyl overdose just 3 years ago. But not only that, we're also dealing with the impacts from the nation's report card, the NAEP. The NAEP obviously is the way we measure every couple of years how we're doing as a nation. And what we're seeing right now is that the effects for COVID affected everyone. They dropped sometimes from maybe their normal range. Everybody dropped 5 or 6 points. African Americans, Hispanics, 9, 10 points. The research says that it could take up to 10 to 20 years to regain where we were prior to COVID. And that's after a second NAEP report is out. So we're in a situation now where we have to think about these things. Every one of your schools has a data person. You have a data guy, data girl, data somebody who can run all the numbers for you. So I'm not going to bore you with those kind of statistics. You can find them yourselves. Google them very easily. But what I am saying is that these are some of the things we have to think about that are also along these lines. So when I developed these programs, or this program in particular, Scholar Identity Institute, I devised it because I was saying, are adults so caught up in their own careers that they forget about what the kids need? Are school boards so concerned with their political futures that they can't give the superintendents enough time to actually make a difference and have an impact within the school district, which falls on you all? So these are some of the bigger pictures that we're looking at across the country. And we're finding out that there is data out there. So we wrote something a few years ago, and you can go online. This is a pre-downloadable document. We call it the Access Denied Missingness Report. So it deals with giftedness in the United States. I had a QR code up there, but somehow or another it wasn't working, so I took it off and I threw a picture of me up there. So that was a change I just made. But if you just Google it and say Purdue University, gifted ed in the United States, or access denied, either one of those, as an administrator, please get it. It's free, downloadable. You have an 8-page summary of it, and then you have each state. We've given the states report cards in terms of their equity, in terms of what they're looking at, how many students in the state are here with regards to race, ethnicity, and rural, urban, suburban, all different areas, and see how your state stacks up in there. Several of the programs I've run, I just completed one last Friday in Nashville. I ran a program. I called it IC Scholar Identity Institute, Motivating High Ability Students. And what I do is I have a week-long film festival with films like The Great Debaters, where I have about 25 young students come in and watch the film about the 1935 debating club from Wiley College in Texas, who ended up debating against, was the first black school college debate against a white school, which was actually, in the video they have it as Harvard University, but it was actually University of Southern California. And in this video, the young men look at all the stuff which saw in the constructs of a scholar identity model, and they actually pull out those constructs and they see those things in their own life. When I talk about the constructs in a few minutes, I want you to think about yourselves, where you are with your master's, your EDD, your PhDs, or whatever degrees you have, and what's your next big step? What are you doing next in your life? Because what I'm trying to do is make sure that you understand that this is not just for that poor black guy or that poor black girl. This is for all of us. I teach this K through 20. A lot of my graduate students are learning this. As I said, Dr. Ramon Goins used it during his doctoral work. That was one program I ran just from the 17th to the 20th. Just yesterday, I just got back last night about 11:30. I got here to, I said campus. I got here to the wherever this is. I got here last night. I got stuck, and the first person I walk in, I see Thomas Jefferson. I said, okay, welcome to Virginia. Yes, sir. Have you ever read, no, I'm not going to go there. All right. I digress, and I told you I wasn't supposed to do that. First Serves. It is how many are familiar with First Serves? Busing. It deals with busing. All right. I am a child of the busing era, meaning that during mid-1970s to early 1980s, I was busing in Boston. Now, clearly, some of you are too young to know that and what that means, but that was one of the worst chapters of education in the country's history. Look up Eyes on the Prize, and you'll see a series in there where buses are being attacked by full adults, right? Because here's the thing. I'm going to give you a quick, how many of you are historians? I know your principles and all that kind of stuff, but you also do history. You had something you did before you did this. Undergrad, you had a major. You remember that life? And you had something you actually liked doing? Okay, yeah, back then. Okay, so let's run this. We already know that the history of the United States is one that's fraught. And as most developing nations, you'll have that. But for most African Americans, I'm just going to give you this for those who aren't history buffs. From roughly around the 1500s all the way up until 1865, hence June 19th, Juneteenth, most folks in this country who are what we consider black or African American, families, descendants were enslaved. Work free, nonstop. 1865 to 1877, we have a period called Reconstruction period, which we call the failed Reconstruction period, which made a whole lot of Northerners coming down and messing with the South. And Virginia is definitely South during that time. And they were actually trying to help create literacy. Now think about the achievement gap. What was the achievement gap for African Americans in 1865? 100%, basically. There was a few people who knew how to read, but for the most part, statistically, it was 100%. By 1865, 1877, at the end of Reconstruction, it was 30%. 12 years after slavery. From 1877 to 1896, we go into what we call separate but equal. Plessy versus Ferguson, where it says that we'll have something separate over here for you, but it'll be equal. It was never equal, and it was always separate. That went from 1896 till 1954, Brown versus Board of Education decision. I'm bringing it up to some of you all now, your parents are living, and some of you might even be living. 1954. Matter of fact, Carter Owens was one second student to integrate E.C. Glass High School, and he's still with us today. So you're up to 1864, 1865, Voting Rights Act. We're still reauthorizing that today. We still have to vote whether or not African Americans have the right to vote today. So from 1954 till 1974, even though we have the Brown versus Board of Education saying that separate is not equal, we should integrate these things. We don't start busing for almost 20 years later. 1972, 1973, we began busing. We bused from 1972 to 1988. In 1988, we see the smallest achievement gap from 1865 that we've seen. Somebody just said, we've done enough of that. We're stopping the busing. Now schools today, according to Jonathan Kozel and some others, schools are actually even as segregated as they were in 1954 as they are today. With graduation rates dropping, plummeting, some cities as low as 20% graduation rates. So when I say we need something like a Scholar Identity Institute, We have a lot of guys who identify as athletes, like I did. Have a lot of guys who identify as players, the ladies' man and all those things, like I did. Had everything else, but if somebody threw a book in the middle of the room, we'd all run away like it was a hand grenade going off. That's what we did. So how do we develop the notion of scholar being as important as anything else? Just recently, as you mentioned earlier, my colleague and I, Dr. Julia Nyberg out of the Purdue University Global, she's also the executive director for the California Association of Gifted, we went to the University of Lynchburg and hosted the third Scholarly Identity Institute for a week. You'll hear the voices of a couple of young men who are actually in the institute. And I want to again say that it's not just for men, it's not just for black men. And you'll see some of the constructs, names have changed over time. Let's take a listen to one of our young men. Mike, where's Mike? Yeah. My sound guy's not here. I'm going to skip ahead, and when he comes back, maybe we'll go back to that, because I think what they have to say is really good. This right here is something, again. While you're playing with it, yep. This is what I'm doing right now. We have a multi-million-dollar grant with the feds at Purdue University, where we're using the Hope plus SIM developing. Matter of fact, when I leave here today, I'll be presenting in Nashville tonight, and I'll be headed up to Indianapolis and Purdue tomorrow to work with a group of counselors who are running our 2-month summer program for gifted kids from around the country, Native American kids from reservations, inner city black kids, rural white kids, you name it. They're all at Purdue University on the campus. The program's been running over 40 years, and we work with getting scholarships for young students to go to these things. But this is something that also, the Jerry Gifted Ed and Research Institute, you have those at Johns Hopkins has a version of it, so I'm not trying to send you any place. All I'm saying is that what I found in my research was that a lot of these young men who were in these programs, one of them even had an ankle bracelet on during the summer program. He actually scored higher on the Naglieri gifted test than everybody else in the group. So I already know that these things exist, but they're cloaked. We have this thing called twice exceptional. Anybody heard of this, twice exceptional? Person might be gifted and have ADHD or something else. Well, there's thrice exceptional. Might be gifted, have a disability, and come from a low SES background, being African American and female. You get the lottery. And these are ones who actually graduate the least, are chosen the least for our gifted and talented programs, and we lose that talent in our home states. And that's something that I think we cannot do. I'm gonna try to run that video one more time, if I can get it. Yeah, sound's breaking up a little bit. So we'll move on. Some of the historical context. Let's take a look at this real quick. Historical context. Why did I develop this? Why do I think it needs to be done? And what prompted me to envision this idea? Well, what didn't prompt me to do it, what's going on currently. This goes back for many years. Part of it was my own family. Part of it was knowing that we needed to make a change within our school systems. And I said that, just like Jonathan Kozol said, in one of his books, he said he went to some school, one of those PS schools, they have like 1 million of them in New York City, and he was in a first or second grade classroom, and in the morning, the kids were saying this chant, "If it's meant to be, it's up to me." And he said, how crazy does that sound? Because my daughter went to a private school her whole life. You know, she went to a Waldorf school from kindergarten till 8th grade. Then she went to Harpeth Hall, which was an all-girl private school. Now she's down at Tulane University, getting ready to go to graduate school. But then I thought about it. A lot of these guys don't have us as parents and young ladies. So unfortunately, because of the political climate and the shift, even though we want to close our eyes or stick our head in the sand about certain issues, the students don't, the kids don't. So we have to figure out how to be brave and have these, as Singleton talked about, these conversations that are uncomfortable. How do we have those conversations as school leaders? that's a difficult place to be. So scholar identity was developed to actually help students self-advocate, because we know over the last couple of years, all of these states here have started talking about you can't say this in a school, you can't do that in school, these books have to go. Update shows that they still did it again, even more states gonna. And just recently, this year, I have new data that shows that it is still prevalent in the United States. So what do we do in the interim period of time, in contemporary context? So again, I want to bring this one thing back to you all, because I want you to make sure that you see this is something I want you to get. It costs you nothing but a download. So make sure you get it. There's a download name, by the way. I did put it there. So if you take a quick pic of that, you can see where to go, purdue.edu/Jerry, and you can find that there. This work, a lot of this work came out of my doctoral dissertation, and I'll see you after if you need to get that again. Came out of my doctoral dissertation, which was entitled Young Black American Fathers, Fatherhood Program, a Phenomenological Study. I'm not going to read it to you. I just wanted to show it to you. That work led into me working with the Fathers and Family Centers in Indianapolis. And that led me to see a lot of things that were going on there. What I saw was a lot of young men going into these programs, young fathers going into these programs, not having a plan, not believing themselves. So we started thinking about these as part of my work. We looked at self-efficacy. Self-efficacy asks these two questions. It asks, can you do all the things or take all the steps required to accomplish the things that you set forth for yourself? And it asks the students a bigger question, and this is it. Do you truly believe in yourself? Now, I want you to think about yourselves now. Now, we're not thinking about kids anymore. We're thinking about us. What's the next? Somebody yell out the next big thing that they're doing. Anybody working on a master's right now? One. Anybody working on an EDD, EDS, Ph.D.? Okay, just yell that out then. Why 5 hands up and nobody said, I'm doing something? Anybody working on getting out of a relationship? Just kidding. But do you believe? Right? So, I mean, we have things that we're doing. Are you buying a new home? Do you believe you can actually make all the payments? Are you doing something, that next big thing that's challenging you, that you can do? Self-efficacy, this idea, this notion that I can put forth the effort and accomplish the goal that I set for myself, in this case, with regards to academics. Can you do those things? I thought about myself as a military officer and as a 5-time national black belt in the martial arts. Could I do these things? But I also thought about it with regards to how many of you are parents in here? I have 2 lovely daughters that I had to figure out, can I do this? Can I do the thing that it takes to become the parent that I want to be? And that's something that we all have to think about. Parents are like teachers. If we think about it, our students are with us from 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. As you get older and athletical, that's a word, till 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night. And if you're Roger Jones, you're with them all weekend. Every time I call him, he's headed to some kind of baseball championship down in Lynchburg. All they do is play baseball and win championships down there. But that's what they do. But again, being a parent for me was one of the biggest and most challenging things that I had to do as a father. And that's something we have to think about. I also think about myself with regards to my job, which is being a professor at a university, and making sure that the students in my charge actually get what they need to survive beyond just their grade, but that next level of education. And oftentimes we don't do that. Someone just told me yesterday, I was in Cincinnati, someone just told me yesterday, he said that he realized that one of his students was on the news one time for doing some kind of crime, and he made him feel bad, and he started thinking about, what could he have done differently? And I told him, I gave him big kudos for that, because a lot of us say, oh, look at so-and-so. They've got their cap and gown on. Oh, they've graduated. They've done this. But we all know some child or some family who's struggling, and we have to think about that. So we have to think about what we do and what our role is and our part to help these students get what they need for the next step, the next level. I also have been doing personal fitness training for last 25, almost 30 years. And one of my very good friends, Marsha Gentry, who was at Purdue University, just passed a few years ago. And so I thought about self-efficacy with thinking about, could I actually help her live the best life she had with the time she had left? So these are things about efficacy. And I only do it for this one construct because of time. And then also, can I do what I need to do with my career in terms of getting out here and actually coming in front of an audience like this with all the accomplishments you all have and actually give you something that you can use or motivate you to do the next thing, to recharge you, to plug you into you allow Teslas in the state? Okay, to plug you into your little home Tesla thing as somebody comes by. They're keying people's cars. Do you hear that? They're actually keying the cars on. Because they get the little cameras on the side, people walking by cars and scratching them just because they're Teslas. That's amazing. Or sad. Self-efficacy. That's what we're looking at. The next construct we looked at is future orientation. What is it that you have to do, that you want to do? Can you think about it in terms of distance and time? Short range, medium range, long range planning. When I tell you to open up your calendar or your computer or look at your Microsoft, whatever format you look at in your school, which is authorized by your server that nobody else can use outside of the building, you know what I'm talking about. You know what you're doing 6 months from now on Tuesday at 9 o'clock in the morning. With regards to what you have to do next, when I started my doctorate program, I was actually working at Martin University, which is down in Indianapolis. I was living at Purdue University, West Lafayette, where my wife was a professor, and it's 70 miles in between. And I made that trip back and forth every day, 140 miles. I had about 50 personal training clients, and I had 2 martial arts schools, and I was an assistant to the vice president for academic affairs at Martin University. When I started doing my planning, trust me, future orientation came a part of that. A lot of our students are looking towards the weekend, maybe. We challenge them to think about what they want to see in their own futures, because in order to achieve it, you've got to, right, plan it. You fail to plan, you're planning to fail. But also for those of you who are thinking about this with regards to your standards, well, how does this fit into our school schedule? How does this fit into what we're already doing? Looked at that. We've looked at some of the content standards. For this example, this one is history. Students from historical and community resources to organize a sequence of local historical events and describe how each period of settlement left its mark on the land. Future orientation. How were those folks then? How did they look forward? How can that relate to a student? With a scholar identity, how does understanding your local history impact your future orientation? What's happening in your community that impacts? I have another video. I'm going to try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, I'm going to be very upset because I really like what these young men had to say. Nope, not working. All right, let me see something here. I'm going to try something. I'm going to do a little creativity here. I was DJing because it was too quiet in this room when I was doing this earlier, so I put my soundtrack on, so I hope it was okay for you all. Not loud enough. I know this room is too big for that, so I'll let it go. Anyway, young men talking about their career aspirations and what they're willing to do to accomplish those things. Next one is willing to make sacrifices. I just talked about, anybody work on their EDS, Ph.D., any of those things here? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, what did you have to give up to actually do that? Social life. Some people said Ph.D., power high and deep. Money. Yes, money, social life, family time. What else? Yeah, those things you have to give up. You have willing to make sacrifices, things that are good for you, that you like, but you have to give them up to make that next step. What are the students willing to give up to accomplish that next big goal? Are they willing? We have to teach them how to deal with that and make sure that that's something that they want. So it asks the simple question is this. It asks you, will you do without something obviously that you routinely have to accomplish your goal? For me, it was I had to sell 2 martial arts schools and I had to take my 50 client list down to about 5 clients. So I went from over $100,000 in 1994 to about $12,000. And I was not happy, but stats 7-something was going to kill me, so I had to decide which one was most important. Willing to make sacrifices. Another student talking, so I'm going to let that go. The next one we looked at was internal locus control. Internal locus control, what drives you? What are you willing to make responsible for something that doesn't happen that you thought should have happened? A lot of this point I deal with the young men is that, and young ladies, is that, is it fate? Is it luck? Is it fortune? Or was it effort? When something doesn't go your way, who do you blame? What role did you play in you not getting the results that you thought you should have gotten? That's something that we have to think about. And by the way, all of these have content standards with them, state content, national content standards with them. And this is something that we like to work with schools in terms of having something that they can actually look at to make a difference in their students' lives. So internal locus control. Next one we looked at was self-awareness. Self-awareness is this notion of identity. Who are we? There's so much going on right now. I'm old enough to remember there were no pronouns in the world. Some of you in here know what I'm talking about. I tell my students sometime I'm Dr. Whiting, Professor Whiting, or Dr. G. That's what I want you to call me, my pronouns. But I understand we're in a different space right now. These are our students, and we have to deal with those issues that and those understandings of identities that are now exist in our culture. These are cultural changes and shifts that we all understand. Self-awareness. Do you perceive yourself? How do others perceive you? And what don't you know about yourself that you need to know? A lot of these young men don't know that one of the movies we showed in I See Me was this young lady who was sexually assaulted. And so what she did was she cut her hair real short and she started wearing like guy clothes, if you will, with a bandana and a hat backwards and a shirt, like a baggy shirt and pants. And when she was walking along the boardwalk one day, a couple of white women walked towards her and they saw her and they all like moved out of her way. And she like looked back over her shoulder and she like smiled because she was now empowered because somebody had taken her power away from her earlier. But in that same instance, she bought into this ideology or this stereotype of what that means to be a young black male who she was trying to imitate. So when we think about things about self-awareness, we're trapped in a lot of identities, social stereotypes that we have. How do we help kids cope with the social stereotypes that they have? And by the way, for this one, I actually did a math standard for this one right here with regards to the standards and the scholar identity. So it's self-awareness. Moving along, achievement greater than affiliation. Where does academic achievement rank in their lives compared to the board, compared to their partners, their friends, their girlfriends? We gave them some dilemmas they had to deal with, willing to make sacrifices and academic self-confidence, where for one example, there was this student who had an exam on a Monday, a big exam. It was a major exam. They had to do well on this exam. And this person, male, female, had the opportunity to date somebody that Sunday before at 5 o'clock. But they had a study group that was meeting at 5 o'clock. Which one do you choose? Research shows that a lot of young men and women who fail tend to choose their friends over their academics. They'd rather have 6 friends than 6 A's. So the choice is still theirs, but making them aware of it was something that I was not aware of when I was younger. I was not aware that this is your responsibility, and if you don't take that responsibility, it's going to fall back on you. You pay now or you pay later, very simple. But dealing with achievement greater than affiliation, ask these questions. Ask, does your academic achievement rank, where does academic achievement rank in your life? As well as, are your friends more important than your grades? So far, all of these things are very much open to all groups, all classifications. This one right here was a big one in terms of the guys and what they had to say. Academic self-confidence was huge. For those of you who remember school, There was a point in time when you had to turn a paper in to a teacher, a professor, or you're writing an article, and it went off somewhere for review, and you held your breath for as long as it took it to come back. And when it came back, it had more red on there. I remember I got one paper back where they had took the red pen and they crossed out so much of the document. I thought it was like a Nixon Watergate paper, redacted, military, high classified, secret document. I said, what's left? This just doesn't work. Will you stay in there and do what it takes? And then here's another thing. How many of you are good at writing, like English and things like that? English, show of hands, I'm waking you up. English. Only 6 people are good at English? Everybody's damn hand in the room should have went up with that one, by the way. Either you're asleep, I'm bored, or something like that. How about mathematics? STEM, just the whole STEM field. Okay. I can see you at that back table back there. You haven't raised your hand once yet. You got all that purple on over there, burgundy, whatever that color is, that whole crew over there. You matched, you called each other, told each other what to wear, but you're not participating here today. Okay, so we think about academic self-confidence. They're not academically self-confident, so they need scholar identity at their school or district or wherever it is. Okay, just picking on you all. The point is that academic self-confidence, we can be confident in one area and not in another. We all can be that way. And so too are our students. But we measure and weigh students as a total, sum total. And that really becomes very daunting. My daughter was the Nashville Youth Poet Laureate at 15 years old. She was a Southeast Regional Poet Laureate by 16 years old. And she wrote a book by 16. And by 17, she was an East Coast National Poet Laureate. She read at the Library of Congress. She's working on her second book, published by actual publisher, not me and her mother, by actual publisher. Because I had some of those too. You know, you publish those things, you go on a trip, you get the little picture, you write something under it. Not one of those. This one was an actual real publisher. And that's because she's our kid. She wasn't born with that. We gave that to her. She's around that all. She can go on a trip to Charleston or come here to somewhere in Virginia Beach, and we go sit at a cafe, and she'd be just content as can be to sit there and just read at a bookstore. Right? Me, I'd lose my freaking mind if you made me do that. But academic self-confidence is something that a lot of these guys identified as not being strong at. And a lot of us realize that as well. And by the way, I hate to keep saying guy, I hear myself when it comes out of my mouth because I can hear it coming back to me. But when I say the students we work with, right? And then here's the one that was race pride, is now race, SES, and cultural consciousness. Race, SES, and cultural consciousness. When I first developed the idea of the race pride one, a lot of my teachers told me they heard Tommy and John standing on the 1968 Olympic podium. Some of y'all too young for that. But anyway, the point being, or how about Colin Kaepernick taking a knee? That work for you? 2016, y'all have to know that. Stop doing your email. You. There's no time to be doing grading. Look at it. Look. Who's in charge of this group here? Where's the president? I'm telling. Okay, so race, SES, and cultural consciousness, right? These are some of the things we have. And I know we have to catch up on mail. Trust me, I hate to open my mail because I get more junk mail than mail I need, and I erase it so quick. Sometimes I erase the stuff I should be reading, and I get it back. But anyway, race and cultural consciousness. Where does this rank? If you remember, anybody remember the Jenna 6 issue? Jenna 6? Jenna, Louisiana. A few years back, there was this incident between these students, white and black, of course. That's the way it always happens. And they had this tree. Some kid was sitting under. Some couple of white guys said, hey, you can't sit there. That's our tree. And they got into a fight, and they beat the kid up. And they hung nooses on the trees to make sure that none of the black kids would sit there. Anyway, the black kid came back with his friends, and they saw it, and they got into a scuffle, right? Before you know it, the 6 students, the black students, were charged with everything from attempted murder to all kinds of stuff. And the attempted murder, by the way, was somebody's shoe fell off, a sneaker, and somebody hit somebody with a sneaker. This went all the way to Rome, to the Vatican, saying that, what are you all doing? And during that time, they wore a black band on their arm to show solidarity with these students who were being almost like we have in many kinds. Think about the Central Park Five. Think about the kids in any time era you find where you can just do a mass, yeah, they're guilty, one of those type things. Anyway, the chancellor from Vanderbilt University, along with 300 or 400 students, wore these bands, went out on the road to protest there on West End Avenue, right outside of Vanderbilt. And while we're out there, 4 trucks pull up and throw these cards out of the window. They were from the Ku Klux Klan, right? But during that time, students at the local high schools in Metro Nashville also heard about what was going on, and they wanted to show solidarity with what was going on with the students. But there was a dress code, and a dress code would not allow them to wear black to school that day, even though teachers did. And the students who wore black that day were put out of school that day. So when you think about things like race, SES, cultural consciousness, these things are real. It's not like, oh, I just stepped in something. I'll wipe it off my feet and I'll go into school. No, it's not like you stepped in something that smells bad. It is actually a fabric woven into the society that we all were born into. We can put our heads in the sand if we want to. I also found out one of the dumbest animals in the world. I don't know, I Google things like this. I found out that the panda was one of them, but the one that takes the cake was the ostrich. Why? You can't see me anymore. Why? I put my head in the sand. And I think, unfortunately, that's what we do sometimes. And we can't do that as leaders. We have to be bolder. How salient is race to your students? And lastly, you remember the one that said masculinity. Masculinity is gender-related issues now. It went through 3 or 4 iterations. Gender-related issues. Because there's not just, and remember, I fashioned that because of the population of young men that I was working with. But we all have these things. I teach a class called Race, Sports, and American Culture. And in my class, it's a freshman writing class, writing intensive class, and I have only 15 students in the class. And each year, I tell the students, put your head down or close your eyes and just either lift a finger or make a gesture if you thought about yourself on campus with regards to your race or gender today. That was the question. And in 20 years' time, I've taught that class 18 times. And 18 times, almost every young lady and every young man who was black or brown raised their hand. A couple of times a white guy did, but it was 1 in 100 would do that. What does that mean? That means you're walking around campus. And I asked one of the young ladies, one of the white young ladies said, why did you feel that way? She said, well, it took me too long to get dressed today. Because I had to figure out how is this skirt too short? Or how's somebody going to think if I wear this? What are they going to think about me there? So this person, your child, who you're sending off to the universities, got to deal with this because we didn't deal with it in the K-12 system. They get to college, university, and they don't give a hoot. They're going to run it. They're going to have you stressed out. More people drop out in their second year of college than any other year. And they drop out not because of academics, but because of social, emotional issues. Issues that were unrequited, and you get to the university level, and that's what happens to our students. So that's why I say it's a K-20 issue. How do we get students to be academically focused and stick with it, even through the tougher times? And I'm about to wrap up here in a second. I have no idea where I'm with time, and I'm sorry about that. But what other supports are there? Things that we have to think about. So let's put this one slide up here and just go from the bottom. This is the 4 pillars that support the scholar identity model. So we have from self-efficacy to race and cultural consciousness, but also on here we have the 4 pillars. Without the family involvement, as you all well know, as administrators, you have dinner nights, you have all these things, you have different times of days that you can kind of communicate with parents and families to help you do your jobs. But you also have school relationships. That's between the administrators. I told you at the beginning, teachers saved my life. It was teachers, a coach who patted me on the back and said, attaboy. And it was some of those things that actually I remember today. One of my mentors was a guy by the name of Roger Harris, Dr. Roger Harris. He was a superintendent of a Renaissance School Corporation in Boston, and now he's down in, I just heard Boston come out of my mouth. Okay, down in Boston. But he's down in Georgia now, And he's still my mentor. I can call him up right now, and he'll be there for me. So how many of your students know you will be there, ask you? How many of your students will grow up and you say, oh, yeah, he was my student, or she was my student? A lot of people don't have that kind of thing. So when we think about the pillars in school, that is very important. Also, we have to look at the school relationships, the community. Community. I did a talk up in Baltimore some time ago, and in the back of the room, very crowded room, in the back of the room, there's 2 police officers. And it kind of made me nervous because I was like, did I park legally? Are they here for me? I wasn't sure. So I just said, oh, whatever. I just kept going. At the end of it, the police officer walked up to me and said, man, he said, you know something, do you do this with police officers? I said, no, I hadn't thought about that. He said, we don't know this. We've never done this. We're doing tactical training and martial arts training and all those kind of things, but we don't know how to what we now call de-escalation tactics. And knowing about some of these things in terms of community involvement, you have the Police Athletic League, you have all these things there. Community. When I was a young man, there were no community programs around for us, so we found trouble to get into. And then lastly, mentoring and role modeling. I consider somebody like a Roger Jones, and I'm just saying it because he's sitting over there. I'm saying it because it's true. When you have somebody who actually not only seems as though they care about you, but makes opportunity for you. Remember the movie Show Me the Money? What's the name of that movie? Jerry Maguire? Yeah, okay, I was checking to see if anybody's awake. Jerry Maguire, I remember he took the guy down to the lobby and walks him through. It was Cuba Gooding Jr. Meanwhile, somebody was stealing his star quarterback up there. Go watch the movie. You can probably find it for nothing now. But walking through the lobby, and he made the guy feel as though it was more than just a player, but he's part of a family. And that's something that has to happen. Without that, we run the risk of never having the relationships that we mean, because no matter what we do, relationships matter, and at the end, that's all we're going to have. I don't know what time I have, but I want to say thank you all right now. Any kind of questions? Thank you. I know it's time to stop talking because my mouth is dry. And I would drink off one of these cups, but I'm not sure which one doesn't have poison in it. Any thoughts, ideas, questions? The QR code is up there. Please take your time and take a shot of it. Contact me if you're interested in talking more. Not to bring me there, not to any of that stuff there, but just to talk about these things. There's great minds in this room that come from all over the great state of Virginia, and I think that's something that you should definitely take advantage of, because everybody, when you leave here, you'll be struggling individually, and together you can do a lot more. So thank you all, and have fun with the rest of the conference.